Hello, it's Andy Prothero from PCR Global with another one of our sort of risk management walk and talks for those of you who are new to risk management. Today I want to talk about a subject that I've realised that I end up with my LinkedIn comment and other people's posts referring back to context. So context, I believe, is huge in everything that we do or say. So I'm going to relate that back to the clause in the ISO standards. Clause 4, which is context. So the ISO standards: context, leadership, planning, support, operations, performance evaluation and continual improvement. So clause 4, which is context, is a very interesting clause, which I'm going to run through the 4 sub-clauses of that clause, which is context of the organisation. So without further ado, where am I today? I'm just down the estuary watching some of the guys fishing. I'm not going to walk that far because it is raining. So context. I always think it's important to actually understand what actually context itself means, because once we work that out, then the clause itself becomes more understandable, and then we can also then understand why the ISO 31000 risks of assessment methodology starts off with establish the context, because it's so important. So context, what is it? So context, we could switch that word round. We could switch that to circumstances. So the context of anything, if you look at the dictionary, is the circumstances in which something is set. So that could be activity, it could be a statement, it could be an idea, but in this case, for ISO, it happens to be the organisation. So the context is the circumstances in which the organisation is set. You'll often hear me talk about situational risk management, and I feel we could almost replace that term with contextual risk management, because the situation is obviously dictated by everything that sets the context for the situation, and the context is also set by the situation, so it actually goes back and forth. Understanding that context generally means circumstances will assist us in understanding the first clause. There's 4 sub-clauses we're going to look at. Context is number 4, then we've got the context of the organisation, which is 1, then we've got the interested parties, understanding the needs of interested parties, for 2, then we've got the actual scope of the organisation is also in context, and the last one is management system itself. So clause 4.1 is understanding the organisation is context. So when we think about the context, it's starting to rain, we're going to think of the internal and the external context. When we think of the external context, we can use we can get assistance from things like pest analysis. So we think political, economical, social, technical, legal and environmental. So that's going to help us establish that context by looking at those external factors. That's external. Always good. Anytime a question is posed or you need to have a thoughtful input on something, I always find it useful to go to internal and external. So think of the internal and external environments for anything, and then we can work through and sort of problem solve or fact find just by using internal and external. So the external context in which the organisation operates. If we're thinking of security companies, this could be which country you're in. So the internal context, we're going to look at obviously what the actual organisation actually does. Are you an engineering company? Are you a transport company? So what are you? So I think we could immediately say there, well, surely the organisation knows its context and what it operates in. But if that was the case, there actually wouldn't be any findings in an ISO audit, and there would probably be no accidents, because I know many companies who don't understand hand-arm vibration assessments, risk assessments. They don't actually understand the requirements, the rules of use of force, or the licensing that's required for weapons, depending on, again, their context. So it is a very good question that the external auditor should actually really wants evidence to show that you understand your context in which you're operating. So that's 4.1. If we look at 4.2, the needs of interested parties, these are your stakeholders. Again, let's switch that internal sort of external context. So if we look at the internal parties, we've obviously got our employers, we've got our managers, we've got all those people on the inside, and we've got really understand their needs and expectations. If we go down the health route for this one, then we're going to look at employees with pre-existing conditions, which again could be hearing problems, could be hand-arm vibration issues, it could be skin issues, it could be mental health issues, but ultimately we've got to look at the interested parties internally. External interested parties, we could be looking at the community from a human rights or environmental standpoint. Obviously then we've got our insurers, we've got our suppliers, we've got other people who we're supplying our product to, our clients. And again, we could do a sort of a stakeholder analysis. We could get that document out and we could jot them all down, and then we could understand the needs of interested parties. Interestingly, for ISO 18788, those have to be documented, and it's always very good documenting them anyway. They also, once we understand the needs of interested parties, obviously they're going to have legal needs as well. So that could direct us to certain laws which do come under other clauses, but ultimately you're going to relate back to that clause. Clause 4.3, the scope. This is the scope of the management system. So we look at the boundaries in which the management system covers. Now, externally it could be geographically, which locations. Internally, you might have certain departments just covered by the scope. So that's 4, 1, 2 and 3 scope, and the final one is management system itself. So the actual management systems, the organisation must establish, implement and maintain a management system. That is actually all the clauses in there taken into consideration. So we need to know what a management system actually is, and then we're looking at a sort of a set of interrelating, interacting sort of components. So we're looking at the policies, your objectives and your processes, and also the sort of objectives that are set for the achievement of those processes and objectives. So that's it, a little bit over time as usual, but context of the organisation, clause 4 split down into 4 other clauses, a really interesting one, and if ever there's a finding, there's a potential link back to the context of the organisation. Just one more on that, incongruence. I always think about this. So you've got verbal and sort of written communication, as we know. Where most people like myself get that wrong, the incongruence is when we say things or we look at the written word, it's not actually what people are actually doing. So this may have happened to some of you, I'm not too sure, but you may want to go out for a beer on the weekend, and you get a text message from the other half, and it basically says, I'm really happy with that. So you think they're really happy with that, when realistically that might be said in a different tone if you're in the house. I'm really happy with that. So incongruence, again, it's a big part of context, and as risk managers we need to understand that context, not just of the organisation but also the situation that we find ourselves in. Thank you very much for watching. As always, stay safe, stay healthy, stay productive, don't trust it, test it. See you next time.